I've always loved stories, and I've wanted to be a writer since I was about 6. But it took me a long time to get to a place in my life where I could actually seriously pursue the craft of writing. I'm a professor, I make movies, I have this channel. I do a million other things, and eventually, about 5 years ago, I decided that it was time to truly become the thing I had wanted to be since I was 6 and be a novelist. And it takes a lot of time to figure out how to take all these things that you've learned and loved and created over many, many years and have them fit this new genre. Because it's one thing to read novels, and it's one thing to dabble with novel drafts. God, I have many, many drafts of novels that I wrote over the decades. And it's another thing to very seriously pursue a career as a novelist. And I started with a novel that was called Grand Gestures, and it was mostly inspired by Gilmore Girls because I love Gilmore Girls. And it had 3 perspectives, and it took place over 2 years, and it was very sexy and delightful. It had all sorts of things going for it. But when I sent it out into the market, I realized that it was too long. I was literally at a writer's conference, and it was one of those where you pitch in front of the person that is potentially going to consider your manuscript. And I handed her my query, and on the first line it said how long the novel was, and my novel at that time was 127,000 words, and she grabbed a red pen and she just circled it. And this is while I'm like delivering my pitch, and I could just like feel everything about me deflating. And she was like, "It's too long." And I was like, "No, but it's not too long. You should read it. There's no fat on the bone." And, like I tried all of these things, and she was like, "It's too long." And eventually, after many months of freaking out, I realized that it was. And I got it to 106,000 words, and I started querying it again, and it got 10 full manuscript requests, which is wild. It's a lot. It's people who are like, "Oh yeah, we like what you've written. Let us read more." And these were from like really amazing agents, our amazing agencies. And then they would all come back and say, "It's too long." Not only is it too long, but it's uncuttable, because debut novels have to be around 85,000 words. And the way that I crafted my tale, everything worked together really, really well. They were all intertwined. So if you were to remove one of the parts, everything would fall apart. Also, I had infidelity, and apparently in Upmarket women's fiction, we don't like infidelity these days. So it all collapsed, and I haven't given up on that novel because it's too long for a debut, but it might not be too long later down the line. And I love that novel. It was so fun to write it. But I decided for my second novel, which is what I'm going to talk about here, that I was not going to put myself in that situation. First of all, I had spent 3 years working on the other one and getting to understand the market. I had a much clearer sense of what I was doing. And also, I was going to come up with something nice and tight from the start so that it would actually have a chance in the market. And that is what I want to discuss here. How do you, from conception, develop something that you'll be able to sell, hopefully? And then how do you revise it in ways that brings out its strengths? Many ideas come to us out of strife and sorrow. And I'd had a very difficult day on February 3rd of last year. And my computer died, and I had a million meetings, and it was all just very, it was one of those days that is very cinematic, but not in the way you want it to be. Everything was just falling apart. And then I came home, and as I do every night, I started dancing in my living room. I danced for a half hour every night to help me, well, stay fit, but also happy and to feel things. And I was dancing to Celia Cruz, who is a classic salsa goddess. And then this story appeared. And I was like, oh, that story is interesting. And I spent, I think, about 3 days sort of writing in notebooks and waking up in the middle of the night with more ideas and seeing things. And then suddenly I had something. The pitch for the novel is that there's this girl, she's 20 years old. Her name is Ori. She lives in this idyllic town in the Venezuelan Amazon. And when we meet her, her fabulous mother, who's her favorite person in the world, is dying of cancer. And the mother hands her a letter and she says, I need you to go to Pittsburgh and deliver this to your grandmother. And this grandmother, Rima, is somebody that they're estranged from. And Ori's like, really? And the mom says, but you can't deliver it right away. You must only deliver it at the right time. And Ori's like, what is the right time? And she's like, you'll know. When the right time is there, you'll know. But I need you to mend the rift with my mother. So her mom dies and Ori leaves this town that she loves so much, makes her way to Pittsburgh, knocks on the door. Grandmother comes out, and it turns out that her grandmother had no idea that Ori existed. So that's her setup. The story looks at these two women. Ori is way older than she should be for her age. Rima is way younger than she should be for her age. So we have a childlike grandmother, a grown-up granddaughter, having to come to terms with all the secrets that they must uncover about their families in order to build a new family together. And can they? We don't know. One great thing, there's a very handsome, very, very handsome, lovely, kind neighbor across the street that has been sort of like a grandson to Rima, who becomes a delightful love interest for Ori. But of course, there are conflicts and things pulling them apart. But it's a story about love and forgiveness and working through our family trauma in order to live the way that we want to live. And it also has immigration and romance, and it's uplifting. I like uplifting things. But I sat down with this idea and I thought, how do I take this fabulous setup and make it work? And one of the things that I did was that I reread Emily Henry's beach read, and then I read, it had just come out, Great Big Beautiful Life. And I looked at the beats that she was hitting and when, and I have a Kindle, I read on Kindle. So like, I'm like, oh, at percentage X, this happens, and at percentage Y, this happens. And it really helps you to sort of sit with somebody who is working in your genre, somebody you admire, somebody whose work you love. When are they hitting which parts of the story, and how can you create your own map that's very much you, because my story is so me, but that also meets some of the desires that the audience has at certain points in the story. And if you want to craft a tale that fits within the standards of today, it's really a great idea to read the people who are doing writing you love that's very successful today. And for me, that's Emily Henry. As I was developing Ori and Rima, I got a really good sense of the genre. I got a really pruned sense of a story that I could tell. And then I spent, weeks working on outlines and character histories and desires. And then I had the summer. Again, I'm an academic, so the academic summer is the thing that I live for. And I spent 50 days writing the first draft, like a crazy person. And I would go back to my outline and I would deviate from my outline, but I stuck pretty well to the spirit of it. And then I spent, about another month later sort of rewriting it. Now, when you're rewriting the draft with just your own ideas. It's just you sitting there going like, oh, I don't know, this scene could be longer and this doesn't feel so good, or it's just you with you. But then at some point, I would say around the third draft, you need to get it to somebody who knows your genre very well and who really will give you the time and effort and love to sit with it. Somebody who's like a really good writer and editor. And I worked with Rowan Coleman, who is a best-selling English author who works in my genre and who I worked with for my previous novel, and I love her very much. She's really, really good at figuring out what is working really well in terms of the story and figuring out what isn't, and giving you enough criticism that it helps you then figure out how to come up with your own solutions. Because it's hard with feedback for the person that's reading it to also solve it for you. They're very good at diagnosing, and then the solution usually has to come from you, and then you can sit with them with various solutions and together work through one. But it's going to be hard for the person that's giving you the full feedback to also just solve all your problems for you. Besides Rowan, throughout the whole process, I have my husband, Nate Bowler, whose passion in life is to spread bird joy, and who has a fabulous Substack, but who also has worked as an editor. Look through it. And in his case, he is somebody who, because he's reading it as it goes, he's telling me what's working really well, he's pointing out the things that aren't working, but I don't expect him to then be the person who's detached enough to look at the whole narrative, because he plays a different role. And it's a really, really important role to have somebody who loves you and loves your work, but is critical enough to sit with you and help you figure it out. So this is how I got my drafts 1 and 2. And then with the sense of what was and what wasn't working, I gave it to Rowan. And you have to wait. You always have to wait. You have to wait for like 6 weeks. And I suggest not touching your novel while you're waiting. You just go do something else. I had many other things to do. And then eventually she comes back, and she comes back with a memo where she explains everything that is working and things that could work better. And then fabulous track changes throughout the whole document that are very specific, not about grammar. My grammar is pretty good, but more about like feelings, and I'm feeling this right now and I'm worried about this, and let's see later. And then there's a Zoom where you converse about the things that were pointed out. And I personally like to schedule the Zoom like 3 or 4 days after I got the memo, so that I can sit with a memo and whine on my husband and talk about what they're seeing. And then I write my own memo where I'm like, look, these are the things that you pointed out. These are the ways that I'm thinking I can address them. These are the things that I don't want to address for these reasons. So that when we show up for this conversation, I've read her memo, she's read mine, and then we're able to have as generative a meeting as we possibly can, because there's nothing more valuable in the world than somebody who has very thoughtfully and lovingly read your work. And you want to make sure when you meet with them that you are as ready as you possibly can be, and that you leave all your ego and bullshit behind. This is not, they're not your fans. They're the people that are helping you get to the place where you might have readers. So you really want to work with them and trust them. As I worked on draft 2 of Ori and Rima, I was very cognizant of length. Can't go over 85,000 words, but I didn't even want to go over 83,000 words. I wanted to really stay short so that it would work as a debut novel. So I kept that draft to 77,000 words, which would give me then plenty of wiggle room, hopefully, later. So one of the things that I got on Rowan's feedback was which were the parts that needed fleshing out and which were the parts that one could then cut to make room for everything that needed fleshing out. And one of the really important things that a good editor will do for you is to help you make sure that your themes are on point, because the themes are the thing that you're going to build your whole story around. So things that don't fit those themes, you can cut, and then the things that are part of those themes, you can expand on. And in my case, she pointed out the ones that I had set out to make sure were the themes, which was truth versus fiction, and then our need as humans to love and be loved in return. And she called them, which means that part of the draft is working. But then also we sat down and we were like, okay, how do you build the characters' journeys around that, and the plot and the relationships around these two things? And anything that doesn't work with that can go, especially if you're trying to keep it so tight because it's a debut novel. The other thing that she pointed out, which is vital to a book, is that my main character's desires weren't always as clear as they could be, and she kept on going back and forth, not only on what she wanted, but on whether she was gonna go after it. And that's a big problem for a novel like the one I'm writing. So it was really good to sit with every moment for Ori and to make sure that the thing she wants is what she wants, and that her stance on it doesn't waver. Conflicts may come and sort of mess with her, but if your main character doesn't know what they want, then it's going to be hard for us to watch. And if they know what they want, but they are just not very good at sticking to it, then it's going to be hard to root for them. So that's something really good to think about in your own work. And as you watch things, how am I feeling about this main character? And the last thing that was key to her feedback had to do with the romance and making sure that it takes all the steps that it needs to take, but also that the conflict that's keeping them apart makes sense and it's coherent, and that it goes with the rest of the themes in the book. And that's really hard to do with romance, because theoretically these two people should be together, otherwise we're not rooting for them in an optimistic book like mine. But there has to be things that keep them apart. Otherwise they would be together from the beginning. And that's, I think, one of the hardest, though most satisfying parts of a book to write. And it was really helpful to have her feedback to figure out how to do it. So it's good to remember that things like romance that people think are formulaic and just the easiest thing to do are some of the hardest, because the very formulaic nature of it makes it really hard to make it original and different and compelling. The key thing, at least for me, with feedback that I think we need to take away from is that it is such a rare gift to find somebody who can help you see your work and transform it. And no, you're not gonna like everything they say, and maybe some of it you'll be like, oh no, but that hurts. But I am so deeply grateful to Rowan Coleman for being my book doctor, the person that heals my books, and to my husband, Nathaniel Boller, for reading and staying with me and helping me go through my projects, because that is about the deepest form of love that somebody can give you to help you really get at the very best thing you can create. And we need it. It's really hard to create without people. And no, you're not going to take every bit of feedback that they give you, but when that feedback lands, it's transformative and it's a gift. And it's one of my favorite parts of being a creative person, to work with others and to give feedback to others as well, which I do as a professor all the time. And it's a what makes the creative life worth living. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll keep you updated on how it goes with Ori and Rima, which is still only on draft 3, and I'm moving on, and I'll be querying it soon, but it's always a tenuous venture. Trying to query a novel, trying to write a novel, trying to make anything that we put our heart and soul into. But if you have good company as you're doing it, in terms of your characters, in terms of the writers that you get inspired by, and in terms of the people that give you feedback, I think it's as worthwhile as anything out there. So let me know, was this helpful? Was this not? What kind of creative projects are you engaged with? Do you like getting feedback? Do you like giving it? What's the most useful kind of feedback you've ever gotten? And as always, please stay big-hearted.